good morning everyone. My name is Daniel Dylan Wray. I'm a freelance music journalist based here in Sheffield. And it's my pleasure this morning to introduce you to James, Chris and Gris from Warp, CPU and TT Records. So yeah, we've got an hour for this morning. I'm going to let these guys pretty much talk and I'll steer it a little bit, and there'll be some time for you guys to ask some questions at the end. But I think if we could just start with you guys just briefly introducing yourselves, the label that you work for or run, and a little bit about the label, just to kick us off, please.
Sure. I'm James Burton, and I work for Warp Records, label started in Sheffield, now international, based in London. We've got offices in New York and LA as well. I've been with the label for about 22 years, which is a long time, and I've been the label manager there for the last 5 years.
My name's Chris Smith. I run CPU Records here in Sheffield. I started it in 2012. It's a small electronic music record label, and that's it.
My name's Gribs. I co-manage a label called TT. Started in Watford by an artist called DJ Pitch in 2014, and I've been co-managing it since early 2017.
Thank you. So I guess I want to start with, we've got an interesting mix of timelines there from 22 years and, 2014 and 2012. I'd be interested to know, obviously I think, James, there's going to be a more starker transformation, but what are some of the fundamental changes or the most sort of key ones that you've each seen take place since you've all sort of started your labels or did your jobs? Even if that's in the last 5 years, or in your case, the last 10 or whatever, how has the role of working for an independent label changed in your times working for one?
The obvious difference is the switch to digital and then streaming that's happened during that time. So, when I started, it was all physical, and it was very early days of the internet, really. So that's just been such a massive change in everything that we do, the way we promote records, the way we sell, the way music's consumed. How that affects what we do is so massive. I don't really know where to start, to be honest, but that's been a big change.
And how about for you guys, who I guess have kind of existed when that shift to digital already existed? Have you still noticed a lot of evolution in that period, or how have you found the last few years?
I do think the switch to sort of streaming is getting stronger. I've always loved the physical side of things. The vinyl CDs, maybe not so much CDs, but I have noticed a slight increase, a slow sort of curve upwards with streaming revenue. So I am sort of trying to keep up with that. It's going against my sort of my sort of love of physical, but I know I need to keep up with the times.
So TT is digital only. We don't do any physical releases. It's quite difficult for me to answer that question, but I think what I've noticed is more small labels cropping up and more people kind of sharing skills and the things that you need to know to start your own label if you want to. And I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah. You mentioned, when you started in 2012, you've kind of gone a little, this is, I'm talking to Chris here, gone a little bit more towards tailoring to streaming because you've noticed an up. Would you say across the board over the last few years, all your revenues are sort of increasing from streaming?
Well, definitely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact splits, but digital is now about 60% of our income. And that's happened within the last 3 years. So I think the last 5 years has been the real change in that. So yeah, that's happened. The other big switch that's affected is the amount of money that's come from catalogue now, which previously frontline releases were much more important. They're still super important because they're going to be the catalogue of the future, but the amount of income that's coming from those is definitely down on what it was.
And as a label that was primarily rooted in physical and has had that transformation to now it's 60% digital, what's the feeling sort of in Warp? I don't know, you can't answer on other people's behalf, but Has streaming become a friend to the label, or has it become an enemy? You know, how have you found?
It's a really interesting one because I don't think artists care at all about streaming, to be honest. I mean, obviously they want people to hear the music, but a lot of artists still think in album terms. They still think about physical. A lot of our artists, like, it's about having the vinyl. I mean, that's the most important thing to them. So, you know, and so the way you approach a record from that point of view, you know, the artists that we work with, we often approach the record from that point of view still. Does that sit that well in the streaming world? Like, sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's not. It works against what you should be doing, because, you know, I mean, I know that it's often better to be releasing multiple singles over a year rather than just releasing 12 tracks in one go, because you can't pitch all those 12 tracks. You know, there's lots of like ways that you can tailor your marketing campaign to a streaming that the artists don't necessarily want. The other big thing is that artists don't particularly like being seen as this kind of homogenous thing that, you know, the way that you're represented on Spotify is just a name, an artist picture, and then your entire discography. They want to present things in a more interesting way, and, you know, they feel that you get more of that experience when you buy the record, or when you're visiting their personal website, or you know, those things that they control, as opposed to just being against millions of other artists in this very kind of homogenous environment. But the flip side to that is that for the label itself, streaming income has come up, and we've now got this kind of background of income, which we didn't have certainly 5 years ago. So on the catalogue, we're now earning on records that we put out 15 years ago that we're not selling anything. And now it's a small amount of money, but there's a small amount of money coming in on all of those records. So that obviously gives you a certain amount of security in terms of what you can invest moving forward, what you can put into artists moving forward, and you know, that is a good thing. The other side to that is that maybe that's a little bit fragile because it's very reliant on three companies. There were big tech companies who don't give a shit about music, really. So, or, you know, about art, they do care about music, but they don't care about individual artists. They care about the wider their model and how music's being consumed, you know, and that change. So that does feel a bit fragile, because if our terms change significantly, which could happen with one of those big companies, then that would seriously affect the label.
And is that something that you've seen reflected in the artists that you work with, that there's still a real appetite to present a full album and not to get sort of lost in the thing? You know, because a lot of people would argue that we're almost in a post-album period. How does that chime with your artists that you guys work with, what James was just saying there?
I think for us, it's not necessarily because the label that I run is often about giving artists their first formal release quite a lot of the time. So even if it is just like a 2-track EP, it's more about the amount of context we can provide. Like what you said, if it's just a streaming site, there's very little information on there, and if we can, especially with like really, really new people, if we can give people more information, I think they appreciate that. And we have a lot of conversations with artists about how they want their stuff to be presented and what will make the most sense to someone that's completely new to it. So that's something that comes up quite a lot when we're talking to new people we want to work with.
I'd echo James' view as well of a lot of our artists. They don't care about Spotify. They see it as a necessary sort of thing, but it's not on their radar. They love getting a physical release, being able to talk about that, and then off the back of that, they might get gigs. And it's like the reputation of the release.
So, I mean, I guess we're in an era where it's never been easier for artists to be autonomous. You know, they can, you know, anyone can, even with a half-bit skill, can design a logo, they can upload things to Bandcamp, you know, you can really shape, you know, complete, I hate using the word, but brand, you know, identity for a brand. So, what is to be gained from a young artist, maybe, I don't know if there's some out here thinking, what's the benefit of being with an independent label in 2019 when maybe they think I can do most of that myself? What do you think an independent model offers people, I guess?
good question. I mean, I think it really depends. There's no straight answer. It really depends on who you are as an artist, what your setup is in terms of management or not management, or what you want to be doing, how entrepreneurial, how much of the business you want to handle yourself. You know, there's all these questions, and there's so many different solutions that you can find to work with now. So from just dealing with a manager, so you know, from just doing it yourself, from working with a small label, from working with a management company. You know, there's direct deals with streaming services, obviously, that, you know, a few of them have been about. Working with a label services company, working with independent, or working with a major, you know, there's a whole range of things. And you kind of get what you pay for within that. So if you want to do it all, then sure, do it yourself. But there's a lot of work involved in doing that. And if you want to take that to scale, then you're not really going to be able to do it yourself. And if you are, your art's probably going to be suffering because you're going to be spending all your time on streaming that.
Sure.
So you're probably going to need to work with somebody. Manager's going to take 15 to 20%, so you're going to pay for that. Label services are going to, you might retain your copyright, but you're going to pay for your videos, you're going to pay for all the teams that you're working with, and all that's going to be recouped before you earn anything. Do a deal with an independent, you might get 50-50 or something along those lines, and obviously you're going to have to sign away your copyright for a period of time, if not lifetime, and so that, you know, there's gives and takes in all these models. Work with a major, you're going to get a much smaller percentage, you're probably going to have to sign away for more, but you're going to get more investment, you're going to get a bigger team, you're going to get an international team. So it's kind of, it's all that you've got to weigh up what you want, how you want to do your career, what's important to you, and that might change as well. So, you know, retaining some flexibility probably is important, but yeah, I think the big question is you get what you pay for. The big answer is you get what you pay for.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it depends on who you are as an artist. If you're really good at promoting yourself, and if you've already got a decent following, there's every chance you could make a good go at it. I would say a label off the bat will have a wider reach, especially if it's 5-10 years down the road, the label. You have to think about that. The label, say if the label's got 30 or 40 artists on there, they've all got their fans, they all know that label, so you've just got this organic reach with a label, what you won't have off the bat as a new sort of artist. So yeah, there is definite advantages to a label, what you can clearly see, but it does all depend on who you are as an artist and how much control you really want.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. I think, especially if you're a new artist, again, that's like the kind of people I tend to work with, being on a label kind of to the outside eye automatically puts you in alignment in some way with the other artists on the label, even if your music is very different from those artists. So that has a value in itself, and I think because of that, think really carefully before you work with a label. Think about whether its audience is going to be suitable for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think obviously you can benefit from both having the brand attached, you know, the label brand attached to your music, but also kind of the family that comes with that. So there might be a network of producers or other players or designers and video makers and all those things that you might be introduced to through the label, which you know, some people obviously have those networks themselves, but a lot of people don't, so that can really benefit. And then just in terms, like you say, once if you associate with the label, sometimes that might mean that you're going to get a bigger billing on a lineup or a festival, or, you know, it definitely helps from that point of view. Whereas, you know, a direct deal or a label services deal, it will give you something, but it doesn't necessarily have the kudos attached to it.
So I guess, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're saying is that there's still a lot of sort of pulling power from, I guess, a sense of call and identity from independent labels, right? You know, there's, as you mentioned before, we're in this sort of homogenous period where maybe artists don't want to just be one of millions of songs, but, you know, if you can immediately, oh, I'm on CPU or whatever, that's, yeah, that gives them a sense of attached identity almost. And is that something that you're finding with artists when they come to you, that they are sort of looking for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I suppose maybe that, I mean, for Warp, that's certainly become perhaps more important again, as we enter this period, that we have got that label identity. You know, I think it's always been important to us, but I think that's that, you know, I think we realised the value, that there's a real value in that. You know, I mean, as a company, we do, because you know there are all these different types of deals out there. So as a company, not necessarily a label, we do cater to wider amounts. So we do label services deals with some other labels and some independent artists, but not for the Warp. You don't get the Warp logo on your product if you do that. That's because we built a network over those 30 years we've existed. We can put other music through that network now, and you know, we can provide services to people to do that. But for the Warp label itself, there's, you know, as we've all just said, I think there's a value in having that attached to your music. So we don't do a label services deal and put the Warp label on basically.
Sure. So, I mean, I think we're interested here in that we've got three labels that are at sort of three different, you know, levels in terms of being around and how they operate and whatnot. So I guess what would be useful if each of you could maybe just talk us through, as an example, how you go through the period of hearing an artist's music, deciding you want to work with them, and putting out their record. I mean, because I'm guessing we're going to have three fairly different levels of response. If you could just each talk us through how that works for your label, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, signing new stuff isn't actually my responsibility. So we've got a head of A&R and it's his responsibility, and he has, you know, a little team of people. So, you know, they're meeting regularly, and I mean, artists come through a whole different, you know, array of different routes. So, they, you know, a lot of them come through kind of the network of people that you're in contact with. So some of them will come through other artists that you know, like artists that are signed will recommend other people. Some of them we might have worked with in production capacity or something, and then, you know, or there's just, you know, I guess it's like, you know, not really friends, good friends of friends, but it's just those sort of networks that spread out, and you hear about people through that. And then often people who signed to Warp have released on other labels before, or they've released their own stuff independently, and you know, you might be talking to somebody for quite a long period of time, or we might work with somebody on an EP or a single release initially, and then look about doing a full album deal or, you know, multi-album deal after that. So yeah, there's numerous ways that might work, but I guess the decisions come down to like a few people who handle that.
Sure.
So slightly different to Warp. CPU is basically, I'm the A&R guy as well as the founder, mastering, PR. So it does all come through me. I would agree with sort of artist recommendations were already on the label have been great for me. I've discovered quite a lot through those means. I have had totally random emails via SoundCloud. They just caught my ear, and then that's it. Before I know it, I've got a relationship going. But yeah, it does. Someone may have remixed something on the label, and then I've just got talking to the remixer, and then the remixer has had their own release. So yeah, it does. There is a lot of connectivity there, but I'm not saying total random doesn't work. But yeah, I think getting recommendations from other artists is a really good way.
I don't think that's new either. I think that's always been the case. It certainly has for Warp. I mean, it's like, you know, a lot of our big signings have been recommended by other artists. So.
And then how about, so once you get that level of, you get that recommendation or whatever, and you've decided that's an artist you want to work with, what, I guess, Chris, for your level, when you're sort of managing everything yourself, you've made that decision, you want to work with that artist, what happens next?
So I will ask for the wave files, basically, of the track, or whether they need more work. Some may need to go back to mix them down again. So I get a variety of artists, some artists who are relatively new, who need a lot of help in that respect, of having a proper mix down. Sometimes I get files sent which are just ready, and away we go. So there's that stage of things. Then I always have to send a a funny email to the artist where things will go quiet for a while, especially when the vinyl manufacturing process is, everything will be signed, send their sort of artist waiver to them, then I send off to manufacturing, things will go quiet for a few months, then we'll start working on the PR campaign.
It's similar for us. Some artists, they want to ask loads of questions, and that might even be the kind of form that the eventual release should take. They might want loads of feedback on tracks, and yeah, some artists we've given loads of rounds of feedback to the actual tracks before they even finally get submitted. Others just go off, and then a few months later it appears, and they don't want anything changed with it at all. But I think for us, being digital only, we have had incredibly fast turnarounds before. Like the Object Blue release that we did at the start of 2018, that was only about a 4 or 5 month turnaround, and that was like our best selling release by far. But we've done unbelievably quick ones before, like less than 2 months. Just because it is, if the artist wants it to be, we can get in contact with them when we've heard their music, and if they want it to come out really quickly, we've got the capability to do that, schedule permitting, with just using like Bandcamp and SoundCloud to kind of release it and platform it. So it can be quite stressful, but I think having that turnaround time allows us to jump on things really quickly when we want to. Like, we actually talk about when we schedule into the next year, we deliberately leave gaps just in case something comes up that we're really excited about and we don't want to wait a whole year to do it.
And so, I guess in terms of when you're at that stage and you decide you want to work with an artist, in terms of things like payment, I presume with Warp, at the bigger end of things, there's an advance, and at your level, I would presume just a split from sales. Is that right? If you're able to go into details, can you talk a little bit about how the sort of payment element works?
Sure. So initially, if we decide we want to work with somebody, we'll make an offer. So that offer will vary. So there's lots of different things within the deal that can vary. So the advance is one of those. So that's the amount of money you're going to be paid up front, which will then be recouped against your royalties that you get paid back. After that's recouped, then you'll start earning royalties. And that's basically for you to live on. Plus, you record the record often. There's a recording advance, which is when you money that we're going to commit to paid for recording, so that must be spent on recording. We'll pay direct to engineers or studios or wherever that may need to be. There's commitments in terms of marketing, so there might be videos or press teams or particular people that they want to work with, or there's lots of things that might be there. The other big thing is the term, so there's obviously we like to sign things for life of copyright or long terms, because for the label it doesn't, especially in the streaming era, it doesn't really make sense to do short-term deals. But you know, there's various terms that people will want. There's what you are collecting money on, so there's obviously just the music side in terms of what you're selling. There's the neighbouring rights, you might include merchandise in there. Some deals there's touring and included in terms of North 360, but that doesn't really happen for us. I know there are deals out there like that. I can't think of other things. I mean, we also own a publishing company, so there might be a publishing deal as well. I think it might go hand in hand in that, which would have its own advance and its own terms and things. So they're all the things that you're going to talk to an artist about, or the management. A lot of artists that we deal with have got management, so you normally negotiate with the manager on those things. And yeah, it really depends where they are in their career. If for an established act who might be coming with a catalogue that's available, obviously they are in a much stronger position than a new artist, and you might be competing against the labels for those things, and so therefore you've got to make your terms at least level with those things. Sometimes the labels we're competing against have got deeper pockets than us, so you can't offer the advance. Don't tend to find the advance is the main kind of sticking point. often the terms and the royalty rates and those things are more important to artists. But yeah, so that's all that would need to be negotiated, deal gets signed, and then the record might be delivered a period of time after that.
So CPU being much smaller, I tend to work on just a release by release basis. So that's right, no advance, but once I've recouped, then it's a split. But before, what I do is I get the artists to agree to a waiver of, and it gives you estimates on how much I'll actually be spending on the manufacturing, mastering, if we need to mix them down, PR campaigns. So I set it out clearly, just as a release by release basis.
That's kind of the same with ours, but we're 50-50 split of everything.
And so, I mean, I guess if anyone here today is, interested in starting an independent label or wanting to go into that, what would you say sort of some of the key skills or things to think about are? Because in theory, it would be nice to say it's just about having good taste in music or being passionate about music, but it's a really multifaceted thing, isn't it? It requires a lot more. So for anyone thinking about going into that world, what would you say some of the main things to think about and key skills are of running an independent label in this day and age?
I would say have a sort of a strong vision in mind. What corner of the market are you after? Because it's such an ocean of music now. You've got to bring something special or different to the table. What will just catch the eye, even if it's just slightly different to the norm. Just something just needs to stand out a little bit, especially if you're starting now with you're really up against a huge amount of music.
Yeah, I would add to that, after you've sort of found the thing you want to focus on and thought about how you're going to platform that or curate your label with that in mind, try and think about how you can do it sustainably. You don't want to have this idea and this thing that you really care about and then get really burnt out because you can't handle all the work, or plan to do too many releases in 1 year and you can't keep it up. Especially if you're, for me, like, I see the label as artist-led as it can be. Like, we kind of exist to facilitate these artists getting a platform or reaching more people, however you want to phrase it. So for me, it's really important that I kind of don't want to let those people down. So if we're over-ambitious and it gets to the point that we can't deliver on what we've planned and we would have to stop completely, that's like the one thing we really want to avoid. So think about how you can do the thing that you want to do, whatever you decide that is, sustainably for a long time. It sounds really vague and basic, but once you start doing it, you'll be grateful that you planned far ahead.
And Chris, you mentioned before when we were chatting that you have a full-time job and CPU is something that you do on the side, which I'm sure is pretty much the equivalent of another full-time job hours-wise. Is it important for you to keep that as a hobby, as a passion, or would you like that to be your full-time thing? And how important is it to have the financial stability of a job so you can put passion into that? How's that work for you?
I would love to do the label full-time. The label would be very different if I didn't have my full-time job. I'd be taking less risks, and it wouldn't have the busy schedule I don't think it has. It would just be a very different beast, I think. I've got my own projections where a few years down the road I may reassess that, but yeah, I'd love to do it full-time, but it's just not possible at the moment.
I completely agree with that. We, DJ Pitch and myself, that I run the label with, we often talk about how, we're glad that we can still take risks and have as much autonomy over what we put out as we can, because it's not our source of income, because we both work full-time. So that's, again, it's something that we're thinking about in the future, but I think for now, it means that we can kind of do whatever we want, which is great.
Yeah. So the sort of that allows a sense of more freedom and yeah. I mean, do you think that's? I mean, it's a little bit of a broad question, I guess. But given you've both been working in independent labels for the last several years and stuff, how do you think that's the way that and as you say, more and more are cropping up all the time out there. It's just it's flooding. Do you think that maybe that increasingly that's the way things will go? There'll just be more and more hobby labels, and it'll become less of a business model in the traditional sense, that maybe there'll be fewer warps in the future and there'll be more of you guys?
Possibly. Let me think.
I think it's an interesting question, because I think you've definitely seen that, and Warp's got 50 staff around the world at the moment, so we're all full time, so there's quite a big difference. But obviously that comes with its problems almost, in that you have to sustain that, and you don't want to be sacking people if things get a bit quieter. So you have to keep a certain amount of turnover in terms of releases. I mean, we've got a good roster of artists now who all want to release. I mean, the problem isn't generally trying to get people to release music. It's like they always want to release lots of music. Some people want to release lots of music. I wish all of them wanted to release lots of music all the time. I think, but so that I guess you lose that freedom perhaps a little bit. But that's not to say it's not a great place to be. We've worked hard to develop that network around the world. But I think other labels coming through, I mean, it's an interesting, people, there have been other labels that have come through, but I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, the weight of the catalogue really helps you to maintain that consistency. And if you haven't got that catalogue, or if it's a much smaller catalogue, then it's much tougher, definitely, for that to be a sustainable business. I think a lot of, like you were saying, there are a lot more sort of start-up hobby labels, but there's also a lot more management companies and managers and independent and label services. So it's not just labels. There's like a whole vast array of people who are all kind of in the same field with just slightly different kind of takes on it. So that's the other side in terms of the competitiveness.
I think some different models are emerging as well, where the label may also run a night or a festival or have something related. So you are technically, you've just got the one job, but you're doing lots of different things, but it's within that umbrella and that brand.
Yeah, that's kind of what we want to aim for. Like long term, we want to try and have our own space that we can offer out, and that means we can do kind of more studio time, arts development, but also offer that space to other labels and collectives to use. And I think, we're the kind of collectives that we look to. They definitely do like more than just the release side. It's kind of very multifaceted.
And do you think that's needed moving forward? Do you think the days of just having an independent label that puts out bands that you love is not really enough anymore? Do you think that you need to have a really strong visual identity? You need to look at things on a wider level and do that. Do you think in order to be a successful independent label that's going to grow and move forward, you need to think beyond just it being a label?
I think there's lots of different types of labels. So there are some labels who are out there who are. I think all of these three labels here are like very passionate about the music. They know exactly what they want to do. There's certain labels that are definitely out there who are much more about making money. And some of those are independents, and some of those are really good at it as well. And they will sign artists from whatever genre or whatever field, and that ones they think they can make a profit on. So I think that they can happen. I think maybe labels that are only focused on like the things they really care about do need to do more things. I don't know, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. If I was to sort of quit my day job, I would have to get involved in much more wider range of activities. For example, mastering. I do a lot of the mastering for my artists. I don't sort of advertise that fact because that can sort of bog you down in terms of time. But yeah, just getting involved in stuff what is related, but just can help you sustain it.
yeah, again, it's just about what you can sustain and what will help that. And for us, it's what can we offer all the artists that we care about or will care about in the future, and new people that we come across. And if, yeah, anything that we could provide as a label that would be more, be that space, a festival, some kind of like different online platform to just uploading music. I can only see that being a good thing. And a lot more artists now that we are talking to, they're not just wanting to work with the music on its own, they really want to collaborate with videographers, choreographers, visual artists, even, as I said, even if they are just starting out. So anything that we can do that can make that easier to facilitate would be really great for us.
And so for you two guys who don't have a staff of 50 people in several offices all around the world, and you know a legacy like Warp's who people will just buy records because it's on Warp or whatever, how have you guys found sort of cutting through the noise? As you said, there's more and more independent labels starting up, and there's a lot of brilliant ones out there and stuff. So as small scale labels that are, you know, independently or autonomously run on a really small team, how have you found getting your names out there? And you know, what have been some of the difficulties and challenges of getting your label through all that noise?
Before I started the label, I used to run an internet radio station, so I built up quite a wide network of followers. It was when Twitter first started and Facebook's early days. And that I sort of cut my teeth in promoting myself on the internet in that respect, you know, the do's and don'ts, and you know, too much spamming, things like that. And I got quite good in that area. And then when I started thinking about the label, and the catalyst was when we came up with the idea, the logo, and the sort of the style. I felt really confident pushing it out there through my existing channels, and it sort of snowballed like that. So I was quite lucky in that respect, but I did sort of cut my teeth in the internet promotion arena.
I think for DJ Pitch, I can't speak completely for him, but he had a radio show right from when the label started, and he said that initially that introduced a lot of people to the label's catalogue and kind of built a kind of core following from there. And that show was for about 4 years. So I think radio was really helpful at the start. We also primarily, well, solely promote online, and we've had varying degrees of success with that. And it also, we've noticed that initially, like a few years ago, Twitter was like a really, really good way for us to promote. And we had a lot of engagement there, but now that seems to have stopped a bit, and Instagram is where a lot of people seem to find out about our new releases or videos or whatever. So yeah, as two people trying to be strategic about that is sometimes quite tricky. But yeah, I would say something that's regular, that an audience can like keep returning to be introduced to new things, that isn't just seeing the new release, is really, really helpful. And it gives them context for what's coming next with the label. So radio's been really, really good for us.
Also, the distribution of the physical sort of vinyl, for a small independent, using a distributor, they really cut into any sort of hope of making profit. You're essentially basically giving it to the distributor. But don't underestimate the power of those records showing up in all the shops, because then those record shops will write about them, and it does have a snowball effect, and then that comes back eventually to the label side, the digital catalogue, and you sort of, sometimes you have to sort of take a step back to go forward.
Okay. So if we've got any sort of young musicians or artists or whatever sat here today and they're thinking, you know, they've got music, basically how on earth do I get myself in touch with a record label? How do I get on a record label? How do I work with them? What are some tips you would give to people? What are some do's and don'ts of getting their music in the hands of people at labels? Best way to contact them, whether they need to be doing things by themselves up front, you know, whether you prefer it if they've already got a social media for and stuff. What are some sort of key do's and don'ts and tips for any artists hoping to work with people like you guys?
I would get your music online for starters, all the usual places. But, well, that being the key thing. But if you wanted to play live and get noticed by promoters, get videos of your live set online. Because believe it or not, a lot of promoters, they're worried about, can the artist actually do what they're doing?
Right.
And putting a video online of all your kit and you're really great and you're doing a really good live set, that gives people confidence. And then you may get spotted by a promoter, you may appear on some flyers, hearsay gets around. Then when it comes to sending your demo to a label, that label might have gone, actually I saw that live set, it was actually good, and then you've got a conversation there.
Sorry, go on.
I would say it's quite clear, when I'm reading kind of demo emails, it's quite clear who is just sending it to as many people as they possibly can, and who has thought about why we might want to work with them, why it might fit with the rest of the catalogue, and given us kind of a decent amount of context to understand what they're trying to achieve before we even listen to the music. And that does make a big difference into how we actually receive the demo when we hear it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'd say that, and ask a lot of questions. Just ask loads of questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's, from my perspective as a journalist, completely echo that. The difference between getting a thoughtful, tailored email, someone's getting in touch and said, oh, I read this so-and-so article that you read, you might like this record that I made. The chances of me responding to that email and listening to it are so much higher than if you just send a generic, hello, what thing, and is that fundamental feeling across the board with labels as well? If someone's getting in touch with you, you want to know
So
why.
it's a huge turn-off when you see that you're just one of 1,000 blind carbon copy. You see.
I think on the other side of that as well, make yourself contactable, even like so many times. If I'm trying to book someone for an event or maybe get in contact about the release, there's like just no contact information on some of these like smaller profiles of people that are uploading like really interesting music. It's so good. So then it becomes a bit of you're asking someone else if they have their contact, and you're messaging on like different platforms that you wouldn't necessarily want to use to get in contact with someone about something like that. So even just, it sounds really simple, but even just making sure that the best way to contact you, that you receive, that you know you're on top of that inbox or whatever, just making sure that's really clear is a godsend for people like us.
Yeah, I think the big thing would be just to get yourself out there and talk to people who are doing similar things to you, get in touch with promoters, get in touch with similar artists, because that's how the whole industry works really. It's this kind of network of things. And, I suppose, release music on other labels or put it out yourself or play shows or whatever those things are, but nobody's going to come and find you in your bedroom, basically. So I think you have to, and just sending demos isn't really probably going to get you anywhere either. I think you need to be doing more than that.
Sure. All right, I'm going to open it up to you guys at this stage, please. So just pop your hand up, and have we got a roaming mic, yeah? Yeah, there's this gentleman here in a sec.
Hi, my name's Matt Anderson. I'm a media composer, and I also sit on the media committee for the Ivors Academy. Given that streaming has decimated the music industry for guys like you, and it's telling that the two of you can't support yourselves through your endeavours, you have to have your own jobs. What extent do you see collective activity as being able to address that and to make the industry a place where people can actually do business rather than struggle to stay afloat?
What sort of collective activity?
I'm thinking of AIM, the Association of Independent Music Makers.
Sure. Well, I think what they do is important, and Merlin, obviously, who represents all the indies' rights in streaming, and in terms of negotiating, like I mentioned earlier on, that with the big tech companies, it's super important. So I think kind of independence. I mean, you guys members of Merlin? I don't know. So I think it's really important that they do stick together. together to enable us to have an equal footing with the majors. And with the longevity of those relationships and how those deals come about, I think that's going to be increasingly important. The other thing is, I think I suppose there is a bit of a split because you said streaming's decimated. I mean, we've seen our income go up since streaming, so it's not decimating it for us at the moment. But it's just this kind of thing, whether that's very fragile. Because
is that your overall turnover or the streaming income?
We've seen our overall turnover go up.
Right.
Yeah, so but that's obviously coming off the back of quite a few years of decline when physical sales were coming down. And I think that the overall recording revenues are up quite significantly because people are reading from catalogues, so more money is being spent on music. But yeah, whether that comes down to labels like ourselves or these guys is a different question, because I think it's quite well publicised that streaming is benefiting the top 10% more than the rest of the 90%.
Winner takes all.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that independence and sticking together is super important. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yeah. Just here, please.
Hi there, I'm James Tolhurst. I'm a musician and composer. And I wanted to know a bit more about the communication between yourselves and the streaming services, and what that relationship was like as a small or independent label. Because you were saying, James, about the difficulty of representing your brand and getting your identity across on what is essentially a bland platform. I just wondered if you could go into a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, sure. I'd expect it varies quite a lot, to be honest, because I mean we're at a certain size, we represent artists at a certain size, so we do get to go and have meetings with Spotify and Apple fairly regularly, Amazon fairly regularly. The reaction, the kind of way they deal with labels varies, so it can be quite a sort of disheartening experience to go in and play your music to people who are just checking their emails and not really listening to it. And that's at our level, certainly for more specialist things, certain things that they get more excited about. But that support is really important. So we do work on those relationships both here and in the States and internationally. But yeah, it does vary. They're all full of really nice people, so you do have those relationships with them. But what they can, the power of those people within those companies varies.
Really nice people checking their emails.
I tend to rely on my distributor to do all the hookups with the streaming providers, and that's not without its pitfalls. I find there's a huge sort of, because I'm not speaking to the streaming providers, it's the distributor. Say if there is an issue, it's really difficult to get that sorted, because your music has just gone off into a sea of digital, and to try and claw something back, what went wrong, or even if it's a spelling mistake or something, it's really difficult. So yeah, it's not without its annoyances.
But the other problem you'll have is that you're one of thousands of releases that distributor will have that week. At least we do get to go in. I mean, we have a few releases a week sometimes, and so you have to pitch. You're only really going hard on the priorities, because there's no point in kind of trying to force stuff that's not going to get there. What do you see in terms of like playlist pickup from particularly on Spotify?
It's happening, and it's slow for CPU, but I do spot it. But sometimes I'm not told about it, because even the distributor's not spotted it, or the trigger mechanism didn't work. So it's just someone might be raving about us, but we don't know. So yeah, there's that area as well.
So just a quick follow-up to that. If we're hearing from you as Warp, one of the most respected and long-lasting independent labels in the country, with a really respectable, world-renowned back catalogue, if you're having to go down and sort of pitch to Spotify to get on playlists and the likes, Are you of the opinion that such platforms are maybe in a position of too much power at the moment? How do you...
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, the fact is that between, I mean, Spotify are very powerful, Amazon, Apple and Amazon between them, you know, majority of the streaming market. And, you know, as I mentioned before, that digital income, which is mostly streaming now, is not, we still do some downloads, but is now 6% of our income, so that's a big chunk of income based in the hands of 3 companies.
So that fight's only going to get tougher between more labels as well, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And label services companies and management companies who are all going in there direct as well. So.
Any more questions? Lady there.
Hi, Phoebe Spencer from Premier Music Group. I'm the sync coordinator. I just wanted to ask something that hasn't really been spoken about is synchronization in general. I just wondered what your experience with that was and how much of a priority, if any, you make that with your catalogue. And
it's really important for us. So yeah, we've got 5 of those 50 people work on sync around the world. So we've got a couple of people in LA, 3 people in London, and it's so for people who don't know, that's synchronization for film and TV generally, and advertising, and film and TV sort of provides a decent sort of base level of income, and if you get decent adverts, then you can have big spikes in terms of income on those things. So certain artists make sense because of synchronization for us. So yeah, it's super important.
And sync is next on my list as well, actually. I've not tackled that, and I need to.
I mean, if you find as well that it's becoming an increasing priority not only for labels because of the profile and income generated, but for artists as well, you're finding more of them, you know, they're more interested in getting sync stuff than they are, you know, chart placements or whatever. Is it a growing realm?
Yeah, possibly. The trouble is with it, it's so, you can't plan it really. It's so random. I mean, so you can obviously pitch all your music, you know, and then they'll pick one track which you never thought about, or you know, so you do the best you can. You have relationships with people. You provide your music in the most the easiest way for people to sort of take on and fit into their campaigns or whatever that might be. But it's pretty random on what gets picked up.
Sure. Yeah, gentleman down there, please. Just behind you.
Hi, Andy Tattersall from Now magazine. In the age of pre-release and streaming, how important is the DJ program? Does it still play a part in gaining that early attention?
It's really, really important for us. I think because of the kind of label we are, it's just like, it makes such a difference to profile and eventually like sales. That is really, really important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken me a while to actually hone a nice list, but I'm quite happy with who I send out to now, and it's always nice to get the feedback, and then you can quote that feedback.
I think for us it really depends on the records you're working on. So I mean, some things we work on are a bit more DJ focused, but there's not as many, to be honest, these days. So yeah, it really varies.
Anyone else? Okay. How are we doing for time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. So I guess I want to ask on, because we've got, so you're London-based, is that right? And Sheffield-based, and Warp is split between London and Sheffield, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's really
It's
London-based,
mainly
but
London,
I live in Sheffield, yeah.
Is geography important in running an independent record label in this day and age? Does it still have any kind of role, be it, you know, cultural or whatever? Yeah, does geography matter anymore?
I think it's so much around the big cities of the world. I mean, it's very spread around the world, but just in terms of, I think you do need to be where the artists are really, and they're in the big cities often. So you know, unfortunately, I think that means everybody has to kind of go there with it. I mean, I don't know, Chris. I mean, you've been running labels successfully here for a while.
Yeah, it would be nice to get to London, but with the internet has made it much easier. I mean, I've got artists in Texas, and we brought them over here for gigs, and yeah, it's doable. It's not ideal, but yeah, it doesn't affect it too much. There's definitely nicer places to be, I would say.
All right, any last questions? No? Well, in that case, please, thanks, James, Chris, and Chris for me. Thanks.